Clint Eastwood has always been an icon of calm, resilient, and untouchable masculinity in the eyes of the world. For nearly a century, the public image was one of a wise, unflappable legend who commanded respect with a whisper, not a shout. But that image was a carefully maintained mask. At 95, the veil has finally been lifted, revealing a side of the man darker and more fiercely principled than anyone imagined. The truth is, Clint Eastwood's legendary patience and silence were not just traits. They were weapons. And when crossed, he used them to cut people out of his life with a finality that echoes through Hollywood history. He is now naming the 6 stars who stood beside him in fame and glory, only to stab him in the back when he needed loyalty most. Once you hear their names and the stories behind the fallouts, you will understand why Clint Eastwood never forgave, and he certainly never forgot. The first name on that list is Leonardo DiCaprio, the golden boy of modern acting. What could possibly make the unshakable Clint Eastwood walk off his own movie set? The answer, surprisingly, is DiCaprio himself, when production began on Edgar in 2010. The pairing seemed like a dream collaboration. Hollywood's most economical and instinctive director teaming up with its most intense and dedicated method actor. But on set, that dream quickly curdled into a quiet, professional nightmare. From the very first day, DiCaprio arrived not just with his lines memorized, but with folders brimming with notes, pages of dense historical research, and even annotated copies of original FBI memos. He was there to solve the character like a puzzle. Crew members noted that Clint's famed patience began to evaporate almost immediately. He was once overheard joking dryly, "He came in like a detective, trying to solve me, and I wasn't the case." The humor was a thin veil for a growing, fundamental irritation, Jonah. The breaking point came during a pivotal emotional breakdown scene. DiCaprio delivered a performance that was raw, real, and flawless in a single take. The room fell into an awed silence. Eastwood murmured, "A perfect cut." But DiCaprio, ever the perfectionist, wanted another go. And then another door. By the 6th take, Clint was no longer behind the camera. He was leaning against a craft services table, sipping coffee, his face an unreadable stone mask. When a concerned assistant asked if he was all right, Eastwood simply muttered, "He's still searching for something I already found." That moment crystallized their irreconcilable difference in philosophy. For Eastwood, true artistry was captured in the first spark of instinct. For DiCaprio, it was unearthed through relentless excavation. After the film wrapped, their professional paths diverged forever. In subsequent casting meetings, if DiCaprio's name was suggested, Clint would just shake his head. "A great actor," he'd say, "but not my kind. They have never worked together again, never shared a stage, and by all accounts, have never exchanged a word since." DiCaprio eventually won his Oscar, but he never received another call from Eastwood. In Clint's world, perfection isn't about endless repetition. It's about capturing truth once and never wasting a second more. The second figure is Michael Moore, the documentary filmmaker who pushed Clint's patriotism past its breaking point. The moment Moore publicly compared Eastwood's film American Sniper to Nazi propaganda, he didn't just critique a movie. He assassinated any chance of mutual respect. Eastwood's response wasn't a loud public feud. It was a profound, silent freeze out that continues to this day. This wasn't an isolated incident, but the final insult in a simmering, ideological war. The tension had been building since 2005, when Eastwood, accepting an award at the National Board of Review, growled into the microphone, "If Michael Moore ever shows up at my door with a camera, I'll kill him." The audience laughed nervously. Nervously. Clint did not. He stared straight ahead and walked off stage. That wasn't a punchline, it was a declaration. To understand the depth of this grudge, you must understand what Clint Eastwood venerates: discipline, quiet service, and an old-school code of honor. He viewed Moore's confrontational documentary style, particularly in Fahrenheit 9/11, as grandstanding politics disguised as art. "He sees soldiers as pawns. I see them as heroes," Eastwood once told a confidant in a rare moment of unveiled anger. It was, at its core, about respect for service. So when Moore took to social media years later to mock American Sniper, writing that it reminded him of a Nazi sniper film from Inglourious Basterds, the line was irrevocably crossed. Moore insisted it was satire, but those close to Eastwood said he was quietly livid. He doesn't forget insults, a longtime collaborator explained. He deletes the person. And that is precisely what he did. From that day forward, Michael Moore ceased to exist in Clint Eastwood's professional universe. Professional universe. Eastwood has worked with artists across the political spectrum, but he draws an unyielding line at anyone who he believes mocks the sacrifice of soldiers. Moore didn't just cross that line. He trivialized it. Today, mention Michael Moore in Clint's presence, and you'll be met with a silence so complete it ends the conversation. Third is Barbara Streisand, the consummate perfectionist who provoked the pragmatic cowboy. If one name can make Clint Eastwood's jaw tighten after 9 decades in the industry, it is hers. Their feud is less a heated argument and more a deep philosophical Cold War that has never thawed. It began in the early 1980s as both transitioned from celebrated performers to directors. Streisand was the empress of meticulous control, known for demanding 40, 50, sometimes 60 takes to capture a single, precise emotion. Eastwood operated on the opposite principle: 2 takes maximum, then move on. He famously believed, if it's not real the first time, it's not worth filming. It's not worth filming. To him, Streisand embodied the worst tendencies of a new Hollywood: vanity, endless hesitation, and the suffocation of spontaneous instinct. By the 1990s, their differing methods had hardened into mutual contempt. When Streisand's The Prince of Tides failed to secure her a Best Director Oscar nomination in 1992, Eastwood was overheard, remarking to a friend, maybe if she made decisions faster, she'd finish more than 3 films in 15 years. The comment, of course, rippled through Hollywood's gossip channels. The final, unspoken victory for Eastwood came with The Bridges of Madison County. Streisand had been attached to direct the project for years, but remained mired in indecision. Faux sad. Eastwood eventually stepped in, rewrote the script with characteristic efficiency, directed it, and starred in it, creating a critically acclaimed, emotionally resonant film that earned his co-star an Oscar nomination. He had executed her abandoned vision flawlessly, and on his own terms, a quiet, masterful revenge without a single public word. They have avoided each other entirely since. In Clint Eastwood's code, you pull the trigger once, with conviction. You do not stand there aiming 50 times. Number 4 is Tommy Lee Jones, the fellow alpha whom Clint could not tame. When Jones walked onto the set of In the Line of Fire in 1993, Eastwood allegedly leaned to a crew member and said, "A 2 bulls in 1 pen. This won't last." His prediction was accurate. Boom! On the surface, it seemed a perfect pairing of 2 formidable, taciturn talents. But behind the scenes, it was a slow-burning duel of wills. Jones was not an actor who responded to Eastwood's signature style of quiet, economical direction. He was intense, argumentative, prone to rewriting lines on the spot, and had a habit of staying deeply in character long after a scene was finished. Eastwood, who ran his set with the calm efficiency of a military operation, watched this performative intensity with growing disbelief. A technician recalled he'd stay in character between takes, and Clint would just stare at him like, "What are you doing?" The climax came during a fiercely confrontational scene where Jones, fully immersed, towered over Eastwood and delivered his lines with searing venom. The director called a cut, but Jones didn't break. He held his glare staring directly into Eastwood's eyes. The entire set froze. After a heavy pause, Clint quietly told his assistant, "A life's too short for that kind of theatre," and walked off. The message was sent and received, and received, and received. From that moment, the professional divorce was absolute. When Jones's name was later suggested for other Eastwood projects, Clint's response was polite but firm. "He's a great actor, but we don't speak the same language." The translation was clear: never again. They have never collaborated since, never appeared on a panel together, and rarely acknowledge each other. In Eastwood's domain, there is only room for one alpha, and he is the one who calls cut. Cut. 5th is Richard Burton, the brilliant but troubled actor who tested the limits of Clint's professionalism. The tension on the set of Where Eagles Dare in 1968 wasn't about creative differences or ego. It was about a fundamental disparity in work ethic. Burton, in the throes of his tumultuous marriage to Elizabeth Taylor, often arrived late, his lines slurred, bearing the physical and olfactory evidence of the previous night's escapades. Eastwood, always prepared, punctual and disciplined, would stand in the cold dawn, watching with mounting disdain as the great Shakespearean actor stumbled through take after take. A crew member later said you could see the respect draining from Clint's face in real time. Eastwood never yelled or lectured. His weapon was a cold, disappointed silence. After Burton botched the same line for the 10th time, Clint muttered loud enough to be heard, "I'm getting paid by the picture, not by the hour." The crew stifled nervous laughter. Burton did not. The final, unforgivable insult came when Burton was overheard dismissing the film as a mere paycheck job. To Eastwood, who believed every project, big or small, deserved full commitment, this was the ultimate disrespect. Years later, when asked about Burton, Clint offered no sentimental reminiscence. "He's a talented guy," he stated flatly. A wasted talent. That was the entirety of his eulogy for their professional relationship. The film was a commercial success, but any personal connection died on that Alpine set. Clint never worked with him again and seldom spoke of him. For a man who believes silence is the sharpest rebuke, Burton's fate was sealed. The 6th and final entry is Jean Seberg, the actress who taught Clint Eastwood the high cost of misplaced sympathy. He rarely speaks of the 1969 musical Paint Your Wagon, and when he does, it is with palpable discomfort. The reason is Jean Seberg. She wasn't merely a difficult co-star. She was a chaotic force that convinced him never to confuse personal pity with professional necessity again. Seberg was emotionally fragile, deeply unpredictable, and already under intense personal strain, including FBI surveillance due to her political activism. On set, her behaviour was a roller coaster. One day she would be charming and cooperative. The next, she would lock herself in her trailer for hours, halting production. Clint, the embodiment of focused pragmatism, was her antithesis. His patience wore thin rapidly. She'd stop mid-scene to question her motivation, a script supervisor remembered. A Clint would just stare at the ground, waiting. You could see him dying inside. The true betrayal, however, came after the film was released and became a critical and commercial failure. Seberg gave interviews suggesting that Eastwood's wooden performance was a key reason for the film's downfall. To Clint, this was the deepest cut, publicly blaming a colleague after he had expended immense effort just to keep the production afloat amidst her turmoil. From that moment, she was erased. He never mentioned her name publicly again. If brought up in conversation, he would simply change the subject or walk away. Even when news of her tragic death broke in 1979, Clint maintained his public silence. Friends reported he seemed saddened, but he never softened his private stance. "As some people aren't cut out for the work," he said on one quiet occasion, "and I don't need to deal with it twice." That statement stands as the closest thing to forgiveness Jean Seberg would ever receive.